So in last class we were looking at matrix conditioning, how to classify whether a system of linear algebraic equations is well posed problem or ill posed problem. This boils down to looking at matrix A, and we'll come to that. I was just talking about the motivation to look at this problem. I showed you a simple system in which reordering of calculations can change the results. Another system in which is inherently bad, ill conditioned, a small error on the right hand side can change the solution drastically. So the idea was to analyze errors of this type. So we are looking at solutions of Ax equal to b, and as I told you, invariably when you solve a problem using computer, you never solve this original problem. We always solve a problem which is A plus delta A, x plus delta x is equal to b plus delta b. We can never solve the original problem except some simple, very simple systems. In general, for most of the problems, let me just give you a simple example. You can, let's say I have this problem pi minus e let's say I want to solve this problem using computer. Okay, I cannot represent pi exactly, I cannot represent e exactly. Actually, for this particular problem, you can find the exact solution analytically. What is the solution? You find a determinant, and then you cofactor inverse. Okay, so the true solution to this problem would be x1, x2. Can you tell me what is the determinant of this? 1 upon pi cube plus e square, right? And what is the cofactor? Pi square e minus e pi into root 2 e square, right? Is it correct? This is the inverse matrix. Okay, this solution which you get here, or this original problem, can never be represented in a computer because pi is not a rational number. Even if you write a rational number, approximations will creep in because of finite precision used in computing. So this is the true solution, I would say. What you get in the computer is the approximate solution of this problem. Okay, and now the real worry is how bad is the approximation? Okay, when can computing make things wrong? Okay, I'll give you a simple example now, which is little more involved. This looks like a very simple matrix. I have given this in the notes. Okay, this matrix is 10, 7, 8, 7, 7, 5, 6, 5, the reason for giving all these examples is because unless motivation is clear, if I just do the raw theory, it doesn't make sense. So this is my A matrix. Okay, I'm choosing x1, x2, x3, x4 is equal to 1, 1, 1, 1, and then if I choose this, I get 32, 23, 33 and 31. This is A matrix, this is X, this is the right hand side. Okay, 1, 1, 1, 1. I have chosen, it's a known problem to you. If I ask you to solve for x, you should exactly get 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay. Now, what if I perturb this matrix a little bit? Okay, I'll show you what happens. If to this matrix I add plus delta A, I add delta A. Okay. Now my delta A is going to be 0, 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.08, 0.04, 0, 0, 0, minus 0.02, minus 0.110, and 0.01, 0.01, 0, and minus. Instead of taking this A matrix, okay, I am going to solve for A plus delta A. Okay, this is my A matrix, this is my original X, okay, and this is my right hand side. I am keeping the right hand side same. I am changing the problem now to this problem. I am changing A plus delta A. I do not know what will be X. I don't know what will be X, and I am keeping the B same. Okay. Now if you see there, my matrix delta A contains very small perturbations compared to, you know, the elements 10, 7, 8. My perturbations are 0.1, 0.2, 0.01, 0.02. Small perturbations in A matrix. Okay. You might imagine, well, if these kind of small errors will not change the solution drastically. You would expect the solution, what you would expect x plus delta x to be? Typically small perturbation in A, you know, my x should change a little bit. Doesn't happen here. If you solve this problem now, okay, x turns out to be minus 81, 137, with such a small perturbation in A matrix, my x changes from 1, 1, 1, 1 to this vector. Okay, a small error, a tiny error, okay, in A matrix can cause solution to change so drastically that you can't even recognize. Okay, there is something fundamentally wrong about that matrix. You make a small error in the representation, your solution can be substantially different. It will not even resemble, you know, this original x. So this is, sorry, this is x plus delta x. Should write this is x plus. So x plus delta x is this, and your x, just compare. Your x was 1, 1, 1, 1. These two are significantly different vectors. Okay. Well, I'll slightly make a difference. Okay. Instead of solving this problem, I'll solve this problem. A plus x plus delta x, B plus delta B. Okay, I am going to introduce a slight perturbation on the right hand side. A matrix, nothing is changed. You have represented A matrix correctly. Okay, my right hand side, it changed to my B plus delta B now is 31.99, 23.01, 32.99, okay. Look at the original B vector, it's 32, I have perturbed by minus 0.01, okay. This side I have perturbed by plus 0.01, this is minus 0.01, this is 0.02. Very, very small perturbation on the right hand side. Okay, how does x change? If I introduce this perturbation, my x plus delta x becomes 0.12, 2.46, 0.62, look at this solution. Where is 1, 1, 1, 1 and where is this solution, or where is 1, 1, 1, 1 and where is this solution? These two solutions with slight perturbation on the right hand side or a slight perturbation on the left hand side in the A matrix or B matrix is changing your solution so drastically that there seems to be something funny about this matrix. You just change something a little bit, make a one small error, your calculations are going haywire. Okay, you would expect a small error committed in A or B would result in a small error in A or in solution X. That's not happening. So this particular matrix seems to blow up even a tiny error in the representation. Okay, this is the background, this is the motivation, and then when you solve partial differential equations or boundary value problems, you have large matrices. Depending upon how you discretize, how you create grids or number of collocation points or whatever, method of least squares, whatever you are using, you have a large number of points and you make small errors there. If those matrices are ill conditioned, you can get answers which are wrong, even when you have a very good program. Nothing to do with how good your program is written, even if you have a best package, numerical package, you can end up getting absurd answers. So now I want to come up with a method of analytical tool by which I can say which matrix is good, which matrix is bad, and that's what is going to be my theme for this particular lecture. Okay, so let's look at this case first. I think with this numerical example, at least you have motivation for why you are looking at this particular problem. Now I'm going to do this two special cases of this derivation because they will give you insight. It's possible to do a more general derivation, but I think the specific derivation gives more insight. So let me look at this case first. Okay, I wanted to solve Ax equal to b. I was able to represent A perfectly. There was no problem. There was some error committed on the right hand side. Okay, B was represented wrong. That's why the solution became x plus delta x. Okay, so this is my original. Let's say x is the true solution, A is the true representation of A matrix, B is the true representation of B vector, and this is what you ended up solving in the computer. Okay, so this is my 2. Okay, what will I get 2 minus 1? So this is Ax plus A delta x is equal to B plus delta B. If I subtract 1 from 2, I will get A delta x is equal to delta B. Okay, let's for the time being assume that, of course, when you are solving for Ax equal to B, A is invertible. If A is not invertible, you are solving a problem which doesn't have a solution, or which may have multiple solutions, which doesn't have a unique solution. Right now let's assume that we have a problem where A has a unique solution. So I am not talking of a system which is just mind you, I am not talking of a system which is singular. This is not, singularity is not the problem. Okay, it's not a singularity. Don't confuse singularity with ill conditioning. A singular system may not have a solution, or it may have multiple solutions. Okay, Singular system may not have a solution, or it may have multiple solutions depending upon whether B belongs to the column space of A, or and what is the null space of A matrix and so on. So that's a different story. This is not singularity. This is something different. Okay. So now delta X is equal to A inverse delta B. Okay. Now I am going to use properties of matrix norm. So norm delta X is equal to norm A inverse delta B, which is less than or equal to norm A inverse, using this is basic definition of matrix. Okay, I am just using properties of matrix norms. So which means norm delta X, change in solution due to change in the right hand side. Okay, this ratio is bounded by norm of A inverse. Okay, well in general, when you talk of delta X and delta B, these could be very, very small numbers, and then the ratios sometimes doesn't help you to quantify everything. We need to talk about relative change. Okay, I would like to know about delta X by X, delta B by B. If I change, percentage error with respect to the original solution. So this inequality is not sufficient. I need something more. Okay. So now I am going back to this first equation. Here Ax equal to B. So norm Ax is equal to norm B, which is less than or equal to norm A norm X. Norm Ax is less than norm A norm X. This is the fundamental inequality which defines the matrix norm. Okay, which defines the matrix norm. So this is, I am just using the definition of induced matrix norm. Okay, so this particular inequality gives me delta B, sorry, here we are talking about B, norm B divided by norm X. This quantity is always bounded by norm A. Okay, norm A. Now this inequality I am going to combine with the earlier inequality. See, this is a positive number. This is a positive number, ratio of two norms. Right hand side is a positive number. Okay. So now combining, let's call this result 4, and let's call this inequality as, let's call this inequality as result 3. So if I combine 3 and 4, okay, if I combine 3 and 4, I can just multiply the left hand sides and right hand sides, two positive numbers which are less than two other positive numbers. So if I combine those two, I will get, if I combine these two inequalities, I get this relationship. Okay, if I do a little bit of rearrangement, you will see why I am doing this. Okay, now this is everyone with me on this inequality? Okay, I am multiplying positive numbers on the left hand side, I am multiplying positive numbers on the right hand side. Two inequalities are combined to generate this inequality. Now how do you derive something out of this? Now, so this gives me this fundamental inequality that relative change in the solution, I am looking at a sensitivity, right? Relative change in the solution due to relative change in the right hand side is bounded by this number. okay, is bounded by this number. Okay, what does it mean? It means that maximum ratio of relative change in x to relative change in b, okay, is equal to norm of A into norm of A inverse. Norm of A and norm of A inverse. What you see here on the right hand side, neither x appears nor b appears, only matrix A appears. Okay, so this if you have a slight error in representation of b, what is the maximum possible fractional error in this? Is something like fractional error, right? Norm delta x by norm x is something like fractional error, right? So what is the maximum fractional error that you get in the solution? This is bounded fundamentally by two quantities, multiplication of two quantities, norm of A and norm of A inverse. Okay, this norm of A into norm of A inverse, this is called as condition number of a matrix. How do you evaluate this? You could use one norm, two norm, infinite norm, whatever is convenient. You can use that norm and find out this quantity. Well, finding out this for one or infinite norm has a problem, because one or infinite norm would require computation of A inverse, and many times A inverse is not computable. Two norm somehow happens to be convenient. I'll give you the way of computing condition number using two norm. So condition number using two norm is very is used very often. So, but it doesn't mean that you cannot use the other way around. You can of course use the other definition. Okay, so this in some sense gives a bound on the amplification factor or amplification of the error in the solution due to change in the right hand side, or error committed. This error delta b could be committed due to variety of reasons. It could be because of representation, it could be while doing some computations. So this fundamental quantity which appears here, I'll show you that in some other context also. When you perturb A matrix, again same number will appear. Okay, so there seems to be something fundamental about this. Okay, now let me analyze another case. Now I want to solve Ax equal to b. This is my equation number 1, and then I end up solving A plus delta A, x plus delta x is equal to b. Okay, I end up solving A plus delta A, x plus delta x is equal to b. If I expand this, it will be Ax plus A delta x plus delta Ax plus delta A delta x is equal to b. Okay, and then I am going to rearrange this and say that delta x, I am retaining this delta x on both sides here. Okay, the idea here is to give you the spirit of what is happening. As I said, it's possible to do a derivation where A plus delta A, x plus delta x, b plus delta b. I am avoiding that general derivation. I am just looking at two special cases. Okay, now this you get by subtracting. So if I subtract, if this is my equation 5, and if this is the same as equation 1 which we have written earlier. So if I subtract from 5 equation 1, okay, b and b on both sides will disappear. Okay, b will disappear on both sides. Ax and Ax will disappear. What remains is this term, and this term. This will go and this will go. If I subtract this equation from this equation, okay, then what remains is A delta x is equal to minus, sorry, A delta x is equal to minus of delta A times x plus delta x. Okay? All that I have done is I have expanded this and subtracted this equation, okay, to get this perturbation equation. Okay. So this implies that delta x is equal to minus A inverse delta A, or norm delta x is equal to norm A inverse delta A x plus delta x, using the fundamental inequality of matrices. I can write this as A inverse norm of delta x, okay, is always less than. So I am going to rewrite this as norm delta x divided by norm of x plus delta x. Is everyone with me on this? So this is something like relative change in the solution, except here we have retained delta x on the denominator, okay, but this is something like relative change in the solution, okay, and right hand side is this, okay. I am going to play a trick on the right hand side. I am going to write this as this quantity on the right hand side. I am going to write as norm of A inverse into norm of A into norm of delta A Is everyone with me on this? Just check this. I am multiplying and dividing by norm A. Okay, I am multiplying and dividing by norm A. Okay, and then I am going to single out this quantity. Okay, and then using this I am going to write or I am going to rearrange this inequality. I am going to rearrange this inequality as follows: norm of delta x divided by norm of x plus delta x. Okay, relative change in the solution to a relative change in A matrix is again bounded by A into A inverse, that is norm of A into norm of A inverse. Again this condition number reappears when you are trying to analyze a system in which A is represented slightly erroneously. So this is again condition number. This is also condition number of A. Okay. So general case where there is error in all three becomes little more complex and you can look at it in some of the textbooks on numerical analysis. But what is important is that this condition number which seems to play the key role in how sensitive is your solution to the errors. See what you are looking at here, how sensitive your solution, what is the fractional change in the solution to fractional change in A matrix, or what are you looking here? What is the fractional change in the solution to fractional change in the B matrix? Well, we had made, while deriving this, we had made that A is perfectly represented. There we had made an assumption that B is perfectly represented but A is wrong. Okay. So basically you just get insights into what really seems to be the key factor. This analysis of based on norms seems to suggest that this quantity is something fundamental. Okay, and this determines how well conditioned, how ill conditioned a particular system is. If, well, to give you a thumb rule, if this number is large, okay, then what is large? Large is say above 1000. if this number appears, this is more like Reynolds number. Below 100, if this quantity is less than between 1 and 100, okay, then matrix is well conditioned. Okay, if between 100 to 1000, it's a gray area, you don't know what it is. Beyond 1000 you can expect trouble. Okay, beyond 1000 you can expect trouble. And if it is 10 to the power 5, 10 to the power 6, deep trouble. Okay, nevertheless, MATLAB is a wonderful software. It can give you reasonably accurate solutions to 10 to the power condition number 10 to the power 5, 10 to the power 6. But MATLAB starts breaking down if you give a matrix whose condition number is very, very large. Now, how do you get more insights into condition number? Okay, we'll use here 2norm to compute the condition number. So, I want to get an estimate of this quantity, right? So, let's do it using 2 norms. For a matrix, if I give you a matrix, okay, we have done this earlier. 2 norm of the matrix is given by largest magnitude eigenvalue of A transpose A, okay. So, this we had done earlier, or max over lambda I, max over not lambda I, max over I, lambda I, A transpose A. A transpose A is a positive definite matrix, always, or positive semi-definite matrix. All the eigenvalues are 0 or greater than 0. Okay, so non-negative eigenvalues. So you can always find a maximum. So let's call this as lambda n. Let's call this as lambda n. Let's say that we have arranged the eigenvalues. We have numbered them such that lambda n is the maximum magnitude eigenvalue of A transpose A. Okay, and it's very easy to show that it's very easy to compute the 2 norm of A inverse without having to compute A inverse. That is very nice. Okay, you can compute 2 norm of A inverse. Use a fundamental relationship. If you are given a matrix, okay, is there a relationship between a matrix, a non-singular matrix, okay, its eigenvalues and eigenvalues of A inverse? Is there a relationship? No? See, if A is an invertible matrix, no zero eigenvalue, okay, then AV is equal to, or let's take B here because we are talking about A transpose A. BV is equal to lambda V, right? Okay, it's very easy to show if lambda is the eigenvalue and if V is the eigenvector. Okay, I just have to do this. Pre-multiply both sides by A inverse, so I will get V is equal to lambda V inverse V, okay, or 1 by lambda V is equal to, so if lambda is eigenvalue of B, 1 by lambda is eigenvalue of B inverse, and eigenvectors are same, just see, eigenvectors don't change. B inverse V is equal to 1 by lambda, okay, non-singular matrix. I'm talking about a non-singular matrix. Okay, there is one more thing, one more relationship which I need to use is that A inverse do you agree with me? A inverse into A is identity, transpose is equal to I. Okay, so A transpose into A inverse transpose is equal to I. Is everyone with me on this? I can interchange inverse and transpose. See what I started with. A inverse into A is identity. Okay, transpose is equal to identity. This is identity equal to identity. That's what I am writing. Then I am expanding this because if you multiply two matrices, and take their transpose, it is, you know this rule, CD transpose is equal to D transpose C transpose. CD transpose is D transpose C transpose. So I am just using that here. Okay, and so A inverse transpose is same as A transpose inverse. Okay, A inverse transpose is same as A transpose inverse. Or let's not confuse with that A here. Let's put this B. B, B. Notationally, I am just talking about general properties of matrices. We are talking about AX equal to B. I am not talking of that A. In general, when A is a invertible matrix, you can write this. Any square invertible matrix, you can show that B inverse transpose is same as B transpose inverse. You can interchange transpose and inverse. Now these are the two properties which I am going to use. I am leaving a few things for you to derive. I am not doing it on the board. But norm A inverse 2 square is equal to max over I lambda I of A inverse into, it is A inverse, see what was here, 2 norm of A is maximum magnitude eigenvalue of A transpose A. In this case we are talking about A inverse. So in A inverse transpose A inverse. Okay. Okay. I am just combining and saying this. Okay. Now eigenvalues of A transpose A. Okay. Eigenvalues of A transpose A. A transpose A is a positive definite matrix. All eigenvalues are positive. Okay. What is the relationship between eigenvalues of A transpose A and A transpose A inverse? 1 upon, right? So if lambda 1 is the smallest eigenvalue of, see, if lambda 1 smallest eigenvalue of A transpose A, what will be the largest eigenvalue of A transpose A inverse? 1 by lambda 1. Okay. So 1 by lambda 1 largest eigenvalue A transpose A inverse. Okay. This is the largest eigenvalue of A transpose A inverse. Is everyone with me on this? So lambda n, what is the largest eigenvalue? We have numbered eigenvalues. The largest one we are calling lambda n, the smallest one we are calling lambda 1 for A transpose A. You have some doubt? A transpose A, we have numbered the eigenvalues. Lambda 1 is the smallest, lambda n is the largest. We have chosen the numbering. We look at the eigenvalues and we number them. Lambda n is the largest, lambda 1 is the smallest. Now, if lambda 1 is the smallest eigenvalue of A transpose A, then 1 upon lambda 1 is the largest eigenvalue of A transpose A inverse. It follows from the first relationship. Okay, follows from that relationship. So now what I need to do is, okay, so I am now going to combine these two things and come here. I am going to combine these two things. So norm A2 square into norm A inverse 2 square seems to be equal to lambda n by lambda 1. Okay, or norm A2, norm A inverse 2 is square root of lambda n by lambda 1, where what is lambda n? Largest eigenvalue, which is also called as singular value of A, okay, largest eigenvalue of A transpose A. And what is lambda 1? Smallest eigenvalue. So condition number of this matrix is simply ratio of largest eigenvalue of A transpose A to smallest eigenvalue of A transpose A. Okay, computing this largest or smallest eigenvalues for a positive definite matrix, not that difficult, not very difficult. Why positive definite? Because A transpose A is a positive definite matrix. Okay, if you ask MATLAB, if you give matrix A and say COND, it will give you condition number of matrix. Okay, it will give you condition number. Actually, it will compute this ratio and tell you what is the condition number. Okay, so this way I would call this quantity as C2 of A, C2 of A. Okay, I will call this quantity C2 of A. So condition number based on 2 norm of the matrix. Okay, likewise I can define condition number based on infinite norm or 1 norm. Okay, though in that case I will have to compute A inverse explicitly. And of course we can do that for a simple matrix to get insights, though for a large matrix that might be not so suitable. So I can define C infinity of A as infinite norm. Okay, depending upon where you choose norms, you can define the condition number. Okay, now let me complete some story which I began long time back, and I never told you exact reason. I kept on saying that polynomial approximations, okay, polynomial approximations give rise to difficulties because polynomials higher than, you know, 4th order or 5th order, you know, you get ill conditioned matrices. Okay, something may appear disconnected now, okay, but I want to complete the loop now and go back and say why polynomial approximations higher than you know, certain order. Okay, so why does it happen that polynomial approximations create problems? I am going to analyze this using condition number. Okay, some time back I had put one more piece in the puzzle. I had showed you that when you try to do polynomial approximations, you get a matrix called as Hilbert matrix H, right? Actually in MATLAB there is a command called hilb. If you say hilb 3, it will give you a 3 cross 3 matrix, which is Hilbert matrix. Hilb 4 will give you 4 cross 4 matrix, and you can just do this once. Just go on creating Hilbert matrices and start looking at the condition number. Condition number is, let's say, this. Okay, condition number of Hilbert matrix are notoriously bad. Okay, what does it mean? It means that if you make a slight error in the representation of numbers, okay, these ratios are going to be, you know, see this condition number tells you worst case error. It is not that for a particular case it will happen, but if it happens it can be very bad. I have shown you some examples, right? You perturb A matrix slightly, your solution just goes, you know, out of box. 1 1 1 1, it goes somewhere else, you know, it's not in some small neighborhood of 1 1 1 1, it goes to 83 and some 52, and so solution can be completely different with a small error. Okay, so let me take this Hilbert matrix. H3 is this Hilbert matrix. Hilbert matrix is a very nice structure. 1 by 2, 1 by 3, 1 by 2, 1 by 3, 1 by 4, 1 by 3, 1 by 4, 1 by 5. And I kept on telling you that second order or cubic polynomial is okay, but fourth order, fifth order, sixth order, seventh order polynomial, okay, becomes bad to solve. Why it becomes? Because you get a situation, you get h times theta equal to some u. U is known on the right hand side, h is the Hilbert matrix, theta are the parameters to be estimated. You got this kind of an equation. Okay, theta are the polynomial coefficients. Okay, theta are the polynomial coefficients, h is the Hilbert matrix, and u is the right hand side. Whatever is the right hand side, what is important is how well conditioned is H matrix. Because you are solving Ax equal to b, this is another form, right? Estimating coefficients of a polynomial. Okay. Now for this simple matrix, you can show that I am going to call this as H3 because it's 3 cross 3. You can show that its one norm is same as H3 infinite norm. This is 11 by 6, and you can actually, for this simple matrix, you can compute the inverse, and you can show that H3 inverse one norm is equal to H3 inverse infinite norm is equal to 408. You just compute H inverse for 3 cross 3 matrix. You can do it by hand also. You will get exact solution. And you can actually get this these numbers. And then what you show here is C1 H3 is same as C infinity H3, which turns out to be 748. Okay, the calculations are not bad. Condition number is 748. Okay, the worst case error that can happen is of the order of 1000 times. Okay, not so bad, not so bad. Just let's see what happens if you want to fit a 6th order polynomial. Okay, in a 6th order polynomial, okay, but even this case, okay, for H6 would be 1, 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5, 1/6, half, 1/3, and so on. Okay, up to 1 by 6, 1 by 7. Okay, H6. If I want to fit a 6th order polynomial, then I'll get H6 into theta. Okay, H6 into theta is equal to u. Okay, I'll get H6 into theta is equal to u. And what you can show is that C1 H6 condition number based on one norm, which in this particular case turns out to be condition number based on infinite norm also same. 6th order polynomial, for a 6th order polynomial, okay, just look at this. Condition number is so bad. Okay, whatever you try to do, you will not going to get reliable solutions. 10 to the power 7, a small error can get amplified in certain directions in very, very bad measures. What are those certain directions? Those are related to the eigenvectors of A transpose A. In the directions in which A transpose A has maximum magnitude eigenvalue, the eigenvector corresponding to lambda n will amplify your error worst. Okay, so it depends upon how is your B is aligned. You will get so this particular matrix, as you start increasing polynomial order, you will get Hilbert matrices of higher and higher order. If you go to 10th, 10 to the power 12, so a small error committed can create a havoc. Okay, I'll just illustrate how things can be different. Even for this H3, okay, then you can judge what will happen for, you know, 6th order polynomial or 7th order polynomial. Why we don't get good results? Why we need cubic spline? Why we need polynomial interpolations which are, you know, piecewise polynomial interpolations? Why do we really go for that? I'll just complete this one example. See, if H3 into 1, 1, 1 will give you 11 by 6, 13 by 12, 47 by 60. Okay? Now, what I am going to do is that instead of solving for this problem, I am going to round off this matrix. Okay? I am going to solve for H plus delta H. What is my H plus delta H? Okay, I have rounded off this right hand side, perfectly okay, right? Just 2-digit approximation. Very, very often we do in doing calculations, and this you might see nothing wrong, you know, 1/3 being represented as 0.333, I am truncating. Okay, nothing wrong. My solution here was 1, 1, 1. Okay, right hand side was this, left hand side was that. I just A plus H plus delta H, and this is B plus delta B. How much does the solution change? Okay, this X plus delta X turns out to be 1.83, 1.08, 0.783. Just imagine a tiny error in every number, okay, trying to fit a 3rd order polynomial. Okay, you are trying to go from that matrix to this matrix, you might find perfectly reasonable. Okay, I'll get this solution. A small perturbation for a matrix whose condition number is only 700. Okay, not very bad. Okay, gives me so much difference in the solution if I decide to represent this by this and that matrix by this matrix. Okay, you see why condition number is so important when you want to study matrix computations. Okay, my solution is, which solution is the correct solution now? The correct solution is 1, 1, 1, right? What you are getting here is completely different, completely different. Just imagine what will happen if condition number is 10 to the power 6 or 10 to the power 4 or 10 to the power 5. Okay, so the solutions which MATLAB gives you, or not MATLAB, I shouldn't single out MATLAB, any software will give you for a high condition, a matrix with high condition number is likely to be a garbage, and you should know this. Okay, when the solution is garbage and when you have committed mistake, if a matrix is well conditioned and if you are getting garbage, you have made a mistake in programming. If a matrix is ill conditioned and if you are getting a garbage, not that the software is wrong, not that the program is wrong, it's inherent problem. Okay, just see here, 700 condition number, small change on the right hand side, a very small change on the left hand side, A and B matrices, you get drastically different solution. Even for 3rd order polynomial, you have this situation. That's why we don't try to fit high order polynomials when you will continue this story, and this is the end of this series of lectures on Ax equal to B. A little bit of it is remaining. We'll complete it in the next lecture.